Hi, thank you for joining me in this episode of GradSWE UCLA presents Women in Science, We Have the Power to Change the World. My name is Yifan Gao, a PhD candidate from Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at UCLA. I'm also the International Student Event Officer at GradSWE UCLA. GradSWE stands for the Graduate Student Committee of Society of Women Engineers. Our goal is to provide support to graduate students and help them shine in their future career. We are going to host a series of interviews to female scientists, and we hope we can encourage more women to join the community of STEM. Our guest today is Professor Julia Rorrer. She's a new assistant professor at the University of Washington in Chemical Engineering Department. She's also the founder of Culinary PhD. Her research focuses on sustainable catalysis. Please feel free to check her lab website and contact her if you are interested in her research. Hi, here we have Professor Rorrer here. Professor Rorrer, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really our pleasure to have you here. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience and also your research and your new lab?
Sure. So I'm a brand new assistant professor at the University of Washington, actually officially starting in a couple weeks. And our lab is going to be focused on sustainable catalysis. And so what I mean by sustainable catalysis is we use these materials called catalysts to help convert waste chemicals or waste products into useful chemicals in a way that's more environmentally friendly. So some of the things we're working on tackling are the plastic waste problem, so converting waste plastics using catalysts into valuable chemicals or new plastics, and also taking things like biomass waste or agricultural waste and converting them into useful fuels and specialty chemicals. And so my background is in chemical engineering, where I did my undergraduate degree at Arizona State University and my PhD at the University of California, Berkeley. And there is when I really got introduced to using catalysts and designing catalysts in order to enable some of these sustainable chemical reactions. And for the last couple of years, I was a postdoctoral fellow at MIT, where I really expanded the use of sustainable catalysis into the plastic upcycling field. So I'm really excited to start my new group and dig a little bit deeper into some of these really big challenges.
Yeah, I think all the topics, especially the plastic upcycling, you're just talking about like to convert plastic waste into valuable chemicals. So I'm a student from environmental engineering. So plastic waste is a really big problem in the environmental field. But there's like a lot of groups in our field that is like studying plastic treatments and trying to degrade the plastic waste. But I will mostly classify them as downcycling because they are trying to just chop off the big molecules they don't care about whether they are valuable or not. So I'm really interested in this topic, like transferring the plastic into valuable products. Would you like to expand on this?
Yeah, sure. I think this is such a multifaceted challenge, and we need a lot of different approaches to think about the plastic at every point in the life cycle. And so what you said about degradation, this is a really important thing to think about when we're designing plastics. Are they going to degrade in the environment? Are they going to linger and end up polluting our environment and getting into the oceans and things like that? But on the front end, there's also this idea of, okay, we have waste plastic. How can we convert it into something that's useful and actually redesign plastic such that it's more recyclable? And this idea of upcycling comes from the idea that maybe we can see waste plastic as a valuable resource for creating something new and really incentivize the deconstruction technologies, both economically and environmentally. And so what we're working on is thinking about the plastic that already exists today, that waste plastic that's ending up in landfills in the environment and it's very difficult to recycle. How can we use chemistry to actually break down the bonds in plastic to create new chemicals? So the traditional kind of recycling that we think about, mechanical recycling, you have a plastic material and you melt it down and reform it into something new. And I think when we can do this, it's great because it's a really great way to give kind of a second life to these plastic materials. But unfortunately, a lot of plastic is not recyclable. And a lot of plastic is mixed together with other things like additives or dyes or food waste. And so it makes it really difficult to melt it down and reform it into a new material. So by using chemical recycling, we're actually taking instead of melting and reforming, we're actually breaking apart the bonds or the chains that hold these plastic materials together. And so that's really exciting because we're able to think about what kind of new products we can make out of them, or if we can make the pristine starting material for brand new plastic that would have really high quality, or create fuels or other types of chemicals from that waste feedstock.
So right now you're actually chopping off real plastics, like real plastic from landfills?
Yeah, so we kind of work both on the applied side and on the fundamental side.
Yeah.
So on the fundamental side, we use model compounds, so things that look kind of like plastic on a molecular level, so we can study the mechanisms and how they interact with the catalysts in order to actually understand what's happening when
Like
we
the
zoom in.
bond, yeah.
Right, but we also take that knowledge and then apply it to real plastic systems. So we actually have gone around the lab and found waste plastic bottles, cut them up into
Oh yeah.
pieces, and added them to our reactor system with our catalyst to actually get out a clear liquid that you can really see, which is pretty exciting.
Wow. So the next step will be like the real plastic from landfills, I would say. So right now it's the bottle from the lab and there is like a real plastic. So in our field, there's like another plastic called microplastics. So I think these microplastic probably we can also use the same technology to degrade and work to like upcycling those microplastics. That's a really, yeah, that's a really exciting topic.
Yeah, with microplastics, there's this additional challenge because
Oh yeah.
you would need so much of it to actually make enough of a product that would
Oh
be
yeah.
sellable. But I think that when we start to understand fundamentally how we can break down plastic, we may be able to start to translate some of that fundamental knowledge to breaking down
Yeah.
microplastics that might be in the environment or prevent the microplastics from existing in the first place by doing a better job of recycling our plastic before it enters the landfills.
Oh yeah, that's true. The source of the microplastic is basically like the landfill, like during the recycling, and it's like a lot of leakage and everything. Yeah, I really. So, are you gonna continue to work on this as a new professor? So you just mentioned you like officially start a few weeks ago at University of Washington. So right now, I assume you are building up your lab. You're trying to find which course you're gonna teach, and also there's like a really big project you're gonna work on. So I think it's like a really fascinating and really it will be a lot of stories behind it. Do you want to share some of this with our audience, like to be a new professor, to continue your work at the plastic and also like your postdoc work and also like PhD work, all the idea together as a new assistant professor? Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to that question. I think starting a brand new lab is this exciting mix of uh, excitement and a little bit of it's a little bit terrifying too.
Yeah.
But uh, right now, I've just recruited 2 PhD students that have joined my
Okay.
group, and so I'm really excited to work with them on some of these plastic recycling projects. And I think thinking about getting started, there's a whole lot of elements to it. We are building up a lab, so ordering equipment and figuring
Mm,
out how we're going to set it up and make sure that we set it up safely and also effectively, making sure that everyone gets trained on the lab equipment. And also, as you mentioned, I'll be teaching a class in the winter. So I'm
yeah.
going to teach a class about kind of more fundamental kinetics and catalysis. So using those kind of foundational graduate level chemical engineering skills that will be applicable hopefully to my students and other students in the department working on other projects as well, like biocatalysis
Mm,
and things
yeah.
like so yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because in undergrad, you learn kind of this basic toolkit of engineering skills and problem solving. And in grad school, you hone in on one particular research subject and really dig deeper and develop a thesis. And, the postdoc, you also kind of start a new project, but the skills that you need to start a lab are very different. You, of course, have to have the research skills and the understanding of the science, but there's a lot to it in terms of management skills and
Oh
like
yeah.
business skills almost, because it's kind of like starting a company. You have
Yeah,
to
like a startup. Yeah.
exactly, you have to raise money to support
Yeah.
your students and postdocs. You have to write proposals to hopefully get grants and order equipment and then manage people, think about mentorship and teaching. And so there's kind of a lot of these elements that you're not necessarily trained for
Yeah.
in a PhD or postdoc. So it's been definitely an exciting journey, you know, trying these kind of new things.
Sounds a little bit intimidating to like a PhD student like me. So I guess what I need to do or other PhD student need to do if you want to be a new assistant professor, you need to learn some managing skills and learn how to write grants and everything. Okay, thank you so much for all the suggestions. So still PhD student, just keep in mind if you want to be a professor, you need to learn like more than research and a lot of other stuff. Yeah. So I cannot help noticing your background there. So it's like a really beautiful pictures. So I know you're also the founder of Color Me PhD. Are that virtual background also part of the Color Me PhD? Like, are you gonna use it for that?
Yeah, thanks
So
for noticing. It's actually a virtual background. This is three drawings that are actually featured in one of the coloring books called Fun at Home.
oh
Um,
yeah.
this was a coloring book that I made during the kind of beginning of the COVID shutdowns. I figured a lot of people are probably at home, not being able to go outside or be with friends. So I created these little science inspired floral pages to kind of share for free online in case people needed a little bit of a
Why? Yeah.
de-stressing
Yeah.
activity.
Yeah, so just to all the audience, so Color Me PhD is an outreach program. It is designed to use coloring book series to communicate current PhD level research in STEM with different levels of audience. So I feel like as a PhD student, we need to learn something about like drawing, painting, like coloring matching because we wanted to make really beautiful figures for our journals, for our manuscripts. So I also have a little bit of experience of making those like journal cover and everything. So I'm really, you know how I'm really attracted to the idea of Color Me PhD. So do you want to introduce Color Me PhD to us?
Yeah, sure. I think we definitely share that interest in kind of
Yeah,
the intersection of art and science. And I think, like you said, visual science communication is a huge part of scientific research. Because I think our research is really only as good as our ability to communicate it and share it with the world, whether that be fellow scientists through a research
yeah,
paper or the broader community to gain a better understanding of the technologies that are out there and how they might affect their daily lives. And so kind of the objective of Color Me PhD was to come up with a kind of creative and fun way to explain complex scientific topics to a non-technical audience. So when I was kind of writing my first research paper, I was also volunteering with young students. And if they asked me what my research was about, I would say, oh yeah, mechanistic studies of tungstated zirconia. That doesn't mean anything, right?
yeah,
To someone who doesn't understand the terminology. So but I didn't want to just water it down and say, oh,
mm,
I do
yeah,
magic potions and and so where do we meet in the middle, right?
yeah,
And I think the ability to use art to communicate concepts and also illustrate metaphors and analogies to help get across some of the more complex elements of the research was really interesting to me because I like to doodle, I like to draw. So
yeah.
it kind of aligned my two interests in communicating science and using art as a tool for that. So that's kind of how I came up with this idea of using coloring pages. Another thing that I really like about the coloring page as kind of a format is a lot of times we get information very quickly. We look at something on Instagram, it's 10 seconds, we get this kind of burst of information.
Yeah.
But with a coloring page, you're sitting there, you're interacting with it, you're taking your time to really learn and and understand and relax and really engage. And so I think in this kind of modern age, the coloring page is a great way to slow down a little bit and be reflective and be relaxed, but also be learning.
Yeah, so basically like coloring those like scientific graphs will make them really reflect on what is behind it, and probably like kids, I would say like your audience will have kids, like kids got interested, they probably will just Google it and to like basically inspire their interest to do science or to understand what's the scientific principles behind it. Yeah, I really love this idea and I want to be part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I also have the following questions for our organization. So I belong to the organization called GradSWE UCLA, GradSWE UCLA. So it's a community of Society of Women Engineers and for graduate students, and also a UCLA section. So I'm gonna ask you a few questions for our organization. So as a female scientist, what challenges have you met in the way that you make these big decisions, like to become a PhD student and to fund Color Me PhD and all the big decisions in your life?
Yeah, I think, in making these decisions, I've had a lot of support and,
Yeah.
both from family as well as friends. And I think that's really helped me feel like I belong in STEM subjects and specifically chemical engineering. So, I think the fact that you're part of this organization for women engineers is really, really fantastic. And I think it's those kinds of support networks that really helped me when maybe I was one of only a few women in the room, or, maybe I didn't have as many professors that looked like me or that were kind of interested in the same things as me. And so I think having that kind of cohort is super important.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky that I had several best friends in my undergrad class. We were all women. We were all in the chemical engineering club together. We actually all decided to take the plunge together and apply to grad school. And so we all got PhDs at different
That's fascinating.
universities.
Yeah.
And so they're both out there now working at different companies doing amazing things. And so having that, I think, really helped me as a woman, as a person in science, just to feel supported and feel like I could do this.
Yeah, that's our organization's goal, is to build up a network and like a society for women engineers that they can like communicate with each other and find support within the community. Yeah. So I know you accomplished a lot. You're right now like a new assistant professor. You also have like a really amazing research going on. So I was wondering, do you have any role model that like female role model that you look up to as you were pursuing your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I look back, my very first research experience was in my hometown, and I had a female professor that took me under her wing. And I remember the first day of my internship, I was super nervous, and I showed up with the other intern and went to her office to meet. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to talk about? And she said, we're going to lunch. And she took us out to lunch, and we just had a great time, and it kind of broke the ice, and really gave me the sense that she's both a human and a researcher. And that kind of role model, I really look up to, someone who can be doing excellent science, but also be, a friend, a mother, a sister, these sorts of things. Like she had a lot of other identities as well. And that really struck me as cool, that she was doing all these things and still, being just a great person to be around. And then in undergrad, I also had a really fantastic female mentor at Arizona State. We did research together, and she was a brand new assistant professor. And so I think seeing her build up her lab, I've been reflecting on that experience a
Yeah,
lot more now, because it's tough, and
yeah,
I definitely, um, you know, respect her even more than I did
yeah.
already.
Because right now you're building up your new lab, like during that time, probably she went through the same thing as you're right. You're going through. Yeah. So it's our last question is do you have any advice that you would like to give women that are currently or thinking about pursuing STEM majors?
Yeah, I think definitely finding a crew
Yeah,
of people to support you and women to support you and to lift up each other is really important. Being part of programs like um, Society of Women Engineers
yeah,
and things like that, is really fantastic idea. And another piece of advice that I would give as well is um, I know a lot of women and people who are from underrepresented groups in engineering and sciences will have this imposter syndrome where
mm,
maybe you don't feel like you belong or you don't feel like you're qualified. And I would say my advice is if there's something that you want to go for, maybe it's a research internship or an award that you want to apply for, and you don't feel like you're qualified enough, don't worry about it. Just put yourself out there. Don't wait until you feel
yeah.
like
You're
you
ready.
are
Yeah.
overqualified or you're
Yeah,
ready.
yeah,
Just put it out there. I think there have been a number of times when I didn't apply to something or didn't start something because I didn't think
yeah,
that I was ready. For example, coloring PhD, I waited to start it until I had published my first research paper because I thought people would respect me more as a scientist if I was published. But
yeah,
in retrospect, I could have started it earlier and people would have been really excited about participating. And so
yeah,
I think that still had a happy ending, but I say, don't wait, go
yeah.
for it. If you have a great idea, if you're passionate about something, um, don't hold yourself back.
Thank you so much for all your advice and your amazing stories. So we are really happy to have you here. And thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This has
Yeah,
really been fun.
thank you. And bye. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Women in Science. We have the power to change the world. Please hit the subscribe button and follow us to hear more stories from female scientists.